Hi guys, welcome to the Lunge and Lift podcast. Today we're welcoming back a very special guest, Liam Holmes from PH Nutrition, to talk about all things hypertrophy, to follow on from our training podcast on why you're not getting bigger while you're doing CrossFit. Liam, welcome back. It's good to see you again, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, lads. Thanks for having me back on. Good to see your faces. I think everyone's getting back in the gyms and stuff like that, but it's still good to touch base with you guys, and been loving the podcast. So been doing some great work, mate. And the last one was fantastic, like I say, on hypertrophy and while doing CrossFit. So yeah, looking forward to getting into that.
Brilliant. How's it been the last few weeks, mate, since stuff started coming back online?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's good. I've been in London a couple of times now because I'm based out in Kent. So it's nice because you get the energy of the gyms and you get to see people, and like I do miss that so much. And it's been really good to kind of transition back. And I think a lot of clients and members on our stuff have been it's just nice to get it back into a routine and not be navigating the washing line with your lunges anymore. So it's good.
Brilliant. Right, let's get into it. So today we want to talk about common issues that people face nutritionally. So if you haven't caught it, that episode we were just referring to was how to train to get bigger and to put on muscle mass. And Liam has a lot of experience in helping people from the nutrition side of things for the same goal. So I guess, Liam, what are the common issues that you see with your clients when they have a goal to put on muscle? And let's start there.
Yeah, one of the most common things that we hear when people first touch base with us or come on is that they want the holy grail, and it's putting on muscle and leaning out. And it's one of the biggest things is that you've got to have a primary focus. Of course, we're not going to just be like a dirty bulk or anything, but I think people can get a little bit lost in terms of misunderstand how hard it is to actually put on muscle or how long the process is. So one of the biggest issues is that commitment of time that it takes to actually put on real muscle is quite considerable. So that's one of the biggest things that we see is just it's that commitment of following a nutrition plan and eating in a slight calorie surplus or increasing certain macronutrients such as protein for a consistent period. Like people can do it for 2 to 3 to 4 days or even like maybe a few weeks, but then doing it consistently, because eating a lot of food is quite hard. Yeah. I always say muscle gain is harder than losing body fat.
100%.
And it's a really challenging process, and it's a quite stressful process sometimes, especially as we're going to kind of talk into that maybe you're predisposed to having certain things that are going to help like block your progress. But one of the things is just that commitment of time. And I think from a nutrition point of view, it's very, very challenging to eat a lot of food consistently. Now, I always say to clients, like, if you want to get bigger, want to get stronger and bigger and put on muscle, then the training stimulus is much more important than the nutrition. So like you can lose body fat doing anything, walking, rowing, whatever you want to do, weights, but you're never going to get bigger biceps, shoulders, legs by, walking on a treadmill. So for me, hypertrophy and getting stronger, the training side of things is more important than the nutrition. Although the nutrition augments that, adaptations and stuff like that, you need to get your training on point first.
Do you know what is on that? Is just made me think back to a couple of clients that I've had over the years, and whenever they've come to me with the goal of muscle gain in particular, a lot of the time they come in from what we call like a skinny fat body type. So a lot of the time I actually recommend people to go through a bit of a fat loss phase anyway to kind of prime their body, because a lot of people have come to me say drinking often because they're city workers, they're always out every Thursday, Friday, Saturday or something like that, having drinks, not eating necessarily the highest quality foods necessarily. So their body, their overall say hormonal profile probably isn't in a great state to start building muscle, and they're probably not in the right mindset either. So as you said, fat loss, you have the freedom of pretty much being able to do most things and say, get to your goal. So not only is that a positive mindset, like I'm achieving things and stuff like that, but you're also putting your body into a prime state, which then means on the flip side to that, so that's your normal, say, 12-week transformation or something like that, as an example, right? So then people will think, well, if I can lose fat in 12 weeks, I'm now going to be able to look like, say, Arnold in, say, 24 weeks, as an example. Where it's like, you got, as you said, the realization of how much longer the journey is when you're trying to put on muscle is what most people don't commit to. And I think you hear the saying of 2 kilos of muscle compared to, say, 2 kilos of fat. And they say, well, but they go, oh yeah, fat weighs more than muscle, or muscle. And it's like, no, they both weigh 2 kilos. Just muscle is this much and fat is this much. So that the amount of size is on the body. So you putting on muscle, to take that 2 kilos of muscle to go across your whole body, you're not going to notice that going on. But it's trusting the process and understanding that strength and size is a long journey. So
yeah, and it's just a touch on that point, guys. You can get, like, hypertrophy is different to strength. Like, I mean, maybe you guys can talk about it a bit more, but we getting bigger, or getting stronger, muscle hypertrophy is part of that. Like I think you spoke about this in the podcast. But there's so many other things that from a neuromuscular point of view, from a technique point of view, that can get you stronger. But when we're talking about getting bigger and putting muscle on, like putting on 2 kilos of muscle, whoa! I mean, that's that's tough. That's a long process. And what we need to do is just make sure that the training is aligned, and then the nutrition side of things is set up towards that. And I just think that, I think maybe people have heard me say I don't think there's anything no such thing as a hard gainer. Now I'm being a little bit harsh, because I think people are, like you say, there are people that are predisposed to make it is difficult for them to do. However, what I see is a lot of clients do things that are making it even harder to do. So, there's things like they're not willing to maybe put on a little bit of body fat, so they end up doing a little bit more cardio or too many extras, which then just burns more calories and doesn't allow their body to have the raw materials to build muscle. They might be doing a lot of they might not be training in a way that's progressively overloading their body. So they're never going to get stronger or never going to get bigger, because they're just doing the same weights or junk volume, and they're just going in and just doing random stuff. Oh yeah, I'm in the gym 6 times a week, but actually the quality of the sessions is terrible. And then from a nutrition point of view, they're eating poor quality food. So kind of, Rob, like you spoke about there, like if you're drinking, if the food quality isn't good, then it's just going to contribute to inflammation. And if your body is in an inflamed state, it's just going to be harder for you to recover from your workouts and put on muscle. So there's lots of other things that I think people are doing from a nutrition point of view that's preventing them from making progress, from getting stronger and bigger. So hard gainer, but sometimes people are just doing things in the incorrect way.
In terms of how quickly somebody can put on muscle mass, there's like the arbitrary statement that you can lose about 2 pounds of fat a week. That's sort of like the rumor on the street in terms of what's physiologically possible. In terms of how much muscle can you put on in a given time frame, are there physiological limits? And like, if you have a massive surplus, can you put on, like, at what point does eating more not allow you to put on more muscle in a given time frame?
Mate, that's the actual stats to say like a definitive number would be challenging. However, it's massively due to your starting point. So your training age, your current body composition, so from a body fat point of view, but also from a lean muscle point of view. So if you're a beginner, as we know, newbie gains, if you're also quite lean and you're maybe a little bit more insulin sensitive, you have kind of low body fat, then your body can handle a little bit more calories. And the stimulus of training, because you're quite new, is no matter what you're doing, you're going to probably grow. So it would be hugely down to your starting point. It can be down to due to your age as well. So if you're a little bit older, my God, I'm 35 on Monday. I'm starting to get into the master's age. So for me, putting on muscle is going to be slightly more challenging because I need a slightly higher intake of protein, and hormonal profile starts to diminish. So to say that how long it would take to put on that, it would be hard.
Yeah.
Now, what we try to educate clients on is that you can make lean gains. Okay, so you can do it. So where you put on lean, but so you put on minimal body fat and you put on muscle mass. Okay, that's what we would class as lean gains. Now, someone that is maybe a little bit overweight and it's really new to training, they can lose weight and put on muscle at the same time. But again, it's due to where your starting point is. For most people, lean gains can occur when you're in a very, very, very small surplus and your training is set up to, like you say, for strength and hypertrophy, but it takes time. You have to be at this for a very, extended period of time. And I'm talking like 3 to 5 months to really kind of see like what you would say like is a considerable or a noticeable gain in muscle. Yeah. So maybe you're looking at again, these are just very, very broad numbers, but like 1 to 1.5 kilos of muscle mass if you're relatively lean and relatively new to training, or you have just started a new training in 3 to 5 months. Now, if you're an advanced trainer, you're probably looking at, if you put on 0.5 kilo or 1 kilo of muscle in a year, then you're doing all right. But if you go to an excess, like if you go to a relatively aggressive surplus, yeah, you can put on more muscle than that, but you've also got to be aware that you're going to put on body fat. And then it's one of those ones where if you can accept that and go into a phase where you might go into the old bro science of bulking and cutting, then you can put on a little bit more muscle quite quickly. But then you've got to diet down, and losing pure body fat again is nigh on impossible. So you would then, so say you put on 5 kilos, and of that 5 kilos, it was 3 kilos of body fat, 2 kilos of muscle. And when you diet down, you might lose 2 kilos or even 3 kilos of weight. Yeah. But you're gonna lose muscle in that as well. So then you're back to, I've only put on 1 kilo of muscle.
Yeah.
So it's very hard. Like, I hope that kind of makes sense.
It does totally.
Yeah. So like, it's a tough process.
I think I mentioned it in our last podcast, or one of the ones that we've done, and it's how the science has definitely changed over the years. So you mentioned at the start about the dirty bulk, and how so for anyone that doesn't know, dirty bulk is pretty much the classic: eat what you want and eat as much as you can of whatever, and to just get in the calories and train as hard as possible. And as I say, there are going to be what Liam's obviously alluded to at the start, where training is definitely a priority when it comes to muscle gain. That can work, and it can work well. But just like you said there, you've then got a lot of the time, you've got the loss of muscle in the fat loss phase, because you have to be in it for a lot longer, and you have to normally do it for a bit harder as well. So, but when it comes to a lot of the pro bodybuilders now, and you're talking about like the Olympia stage, so this is the highest of the sport, a lot of these athletes now do not get into the dirty bulks that they used to. A lot of them now stay so close to stage ready, because even though they might be assisted in one way or another, that's not the point. They then know that they can put on muscle, but they know if their body's in a more of a primed state to put on muscle, and that's being that little bit leaner, then they're going to be able to get more out of the assistance that they put in and their training. So it just shows, if the pros are doing it at the highest level, that has to leak down. And I think it's because of the aesthetics focus of this, and people wanted to put on muscle for whatever their reason may be. As soon as they then start to see an increase in body fat, they're like, now I need to diet. And it's exactly like where you said there, is that this takes time. So you will have to say diet if you want to be looking shredded, say, and with this extra, you will have to diet. But if you're not too fussed about it and you're genuinely looking for muscle gain, and you're doing it in a steady manner, just like with the weights, that progressive overload, which you alluded to at the start there. If you steadily put on size and everything like that, your muscle, your fat mass is not going to increase tenfold. So your diet is not going to be that hard. You can just do a little mini cut, just so you know, maybe improve some insulin sensitivity and stuff like that. Maybe just put yourself into a little bit of a prime state and then carry on your gain, because you need to commit for the long run here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, mate. So like from a practical point of view, the listeners is kind of take this home, is how we would set up someone for a, like, Ash comes to us. He's like, right, I've got a strength plan and I want to get a little bit stronger. I want to put on a little bit of muscle mass, but again, don't want to gain too much fat. So like what we would do is set his calories to maybe be in a very, very slight surplus for maybe 4 weeks or 3 weeks of the month. So we kind of work in 6-week blocks. So maybe 3 weeks where you would look at being a very slight surplus. And I mean, we're talking maybe 150 to 200 calories, a day. So over the week, you're maybe, looking at kind of being in a surplus of around 1,200 calories. And then on maybe your rest day, you might just go to maintenance, like you say, just to feel that little bit, less food, a little bit lighter. But you've got to commit for that 3 to 4 weeks. Now, what we would then do is for 2 weeks, we increase people's intake. Okay. The reason for this is that you accumulate fatigue over the first 3 to 4 weeks of your training block. And then you need to support this, because what we're trying to do is progressively overload. Now, if you diet down in that 2 weeks, or when you feel that you're maybe getting a bit heavier and then your weights are wanting to go up, this is something that's not going to work. It's, well, less food, but more, I've got to progressively overload my training. Well, that's where a lot of people hit a block. So you've got to then look at increasing for just a 2-week period. So you might bump up your intake on 2 or 3 days a week. Don't, listeners, if you to take home something, is you don't have to increase every single day. When you say, oh, well, I'm eating in a surplus, you can do this on 1 or 2 days a week. Do it on your hardest training days. Bump that up by 150 calories. So all of a sudden, on your 2 training days, you're eating an extra 200 calories. And that can be from a snack or adding onto a meal or whatever. What that's going to do is it's going to support your training during the hardest period of that block, of that phase. And then when you're on a deload week, when you're on a slightly, the start of a new program, if you want to diet down, that's the time to do it. It's the time to do it because you've got slightly less volume, slightly less load, slightly less intensity, and your body can then still recover from the training. So again, we would look in 6-week blocks where you might then go 4 weeks, 2 weeks increase, 1 week where you might be in a slight deficit, just to say, lean out a tiny bit, drop a little bit of like fluff, because you can do that in a week, 10 days time. Like, that will happen. And then you repeat the process. But all too often we see people do it for 3 to 4 weeks, start to feel a bit heavier, and then drop their calories because or start to do loads of extras of cardio, of HIIT, of loads of WODs, and then all of a sudden this impairs their progression in terms of the stimulus from the hypertrophy training. So if people can kind of follow that that's the way that we work with clients from a real general point of view. But if people do that, I'm telling you, you'll make amazing progress, and you'll feel so much better. And all too often we see people feel leaner when they put the extra calories in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah,
they wake up feeling more athletic, feeling stronger.
In the I think that's a really nice thing that you've just given, like a nice 6-week overview of like the generalized approach. So this is where the importance of making sure your training aligns with your nutrition, because it's like the nutritionist and your trainer, whether that's just you or whoever, they need that correspondence and need to talk to each other, because if the nutritionist is giving you that kind of structure, but your training is based on 4-week blocks or 8-week blocks, then there's going to be that mismatch. So I guess it's making sure which I know you do really well, educating the client into why you're doing certain things, so that even if they don't tell their trainer, they can maybe then make the necessary changes, or then tell you around their training, which I know obviously you'd make sure their training would their nutrition would reflect the training stimulus. So
100%. So if you got a 4-week block, you do 3 weeks of your what we would call your baseline intake, where you'll be in a slight surplus, and then you would go 1 week higher intake, and then maybe 1 week lower intake, and then you repeat that 4-week block again. If you're doing an 8-week block, you might just do 4 weeks, 2 weeks, and then maybe have just like go back to baseline, and then wait to the end. Again, always wait until the end in a deload week, in the first week of a new program, if you want to, that's the time to drop your calories. So you can make it work.
I've got a question, and we've spoken about it twice, but I think it's worth explaining to the listeners insulin sensitivity, because it's something that Charles Poliquin was always big on, like earning your carbs. You've got to be lean enough. I don't know what exactly he said, something like until you've got abs, you're not allowed carbs. Just for the listeners' benefit, Liam, could you please explain what you mean by insulin sensitivity and how it relates to building muscle?
Yeah, so insulin is an anabolic hormone. It's a storage hormone. Okay, so when we eat food, predominantly carbohydrates, we release insulin. So insulin takes nutrients out of the bloodstream and stores them in muscle. Okay, so it can also store it in body fat, as body fat. So obese people can be insulin resistant, where you just constantly releasing insulin. Okay, and now the body then becomes resistant to insulin. When you're sensitive to insulin, you need a smaller amount released to do the same job. And basically your body is a little bit more efficient at storing carbohydrates and storing protein into the muscles, and actually instead of being stored as body fat. So insulin sensitivity can be increased by decreasing your body fat, but it can also be increased post-training or after strength training. Now, we're not saying that you need to be worrying about the anabolic window and making sure that you're taking in after 30 minutes. But if you do the right training stimulus, your insulin sensitivity goes up. So basically your muscles are almost like the gates open. Okay, so after you do the right form of training stimulus, the gates to your muscles are open. They're like, basically, you've broken me down, refeed me, I'm here to be replenished. Now, over time, those gates slowly close. Okay, so what we want to do is take advantage of that by making sure that our nutrition is on point for that day, for that post-workout period. Not that 30 minutes. Well, I mean, we can definitely do that, but that post-workout period, that day, you know, the days preceding this. And if we train regularly, that insulin sensitivity is, again, the gates keep opening, we get our nutrition on point, we're going to be storing, because insulin's a storage hormone, we're going to be storing the protein and carbohydrates in our muscle, which is going to be used for repair and regeneration, as opposed to if we do nothing and we're sedentary, then insulin sensitivity is lower. So the gates are closed because we're not doing anything to stimulate that. So then when we eat, where does it get stored? Primarily in as body fat. And as we get more body fat, outside the gates. Exactly. So that's why, you know, you're sedentary, you know, you filled your petrol tank up of glycogen. So all your muscles are stored. You got loads of energy because you haven't really been doing anything. So then it's like you're overfilling the tank. So insulin's like, right, I've got to store this somewhere. Where am I going to put it? So it just stores it as body fat. So insulin sensitivity is a really important thing for building muscle because it's an anabolic hormone. Now, the more sensitive we are from having a slightly lower body fat, and the more insulin sensitive we are from doing the correct training, it's just going to be conducive to building muscle.
So if somebody's leaner, do you think they've got more scope to have carbs throughout the day than somebody who's carrying more body fat? You'd keep the carbs around training?
Yes, 100%. And the more active someone is, so the more NEAT that they do, the more walking, the more training that they're doing as well, then, you know, like you say, the more insulin sensitive they potentially are, so they can increase their carbohydrates across the day. If you're trying to, you know, if you are a little bit overweight and you want to, like you say, like have this holy grail of leaning out and getting a bit stronger, then yeah, start with putting it around your workout window, because it's going to be used there. But then as you get leaner and as you're training more, then you can use them throughout the day, because as we know with everything, there's a limiting, there's only so much that your body can absorb in one one hit from a protein and carbohydrate point of view. So you're going to need to distribute your intake.
So does that explain?
Yeah,
I think just classic bodybuilding diet.
Yeah, mate. No, that's exactly
6
it.
meals,
like
chicken, rice, and broccoli. Well,
the reason why that is it's people think it's bro science, but it's kind of not. Like, post protein intake over the day is crucial for gaining muscle. So 6 meals, that's really evenly spaced, and they're hitting protein at every single meal. So there's a an increase in protein synthesis. There's a decrease in protein breakdown because you're having regular feeds. They're also getting their micronutrients in from veggies, and they're distributing the carbohydrates in a sensible manner so the body can, that they can use it, because it's not like, oh, I've eaten 150 grams of carbohydrates and 60 grams of fat from a pizza, but the rest of the day I didn't eat anything. And I'm not saying that people need to do that. I think we'll talk about body types now, but it's not bro science, but it's it's a little bit it's not the best social kind of thing, but practical.
I think a big thing is on the bro science side of stuff is, it might be bro science, but these are the people that are actively trying to improve their bodies. So this all normally comes from like the bodybuilding world, and the problem is then people either try to commercialize it and then make it into something that it's not, or people just don't fully understand the big guy in the gym and type. That's how obviously the bro science comes about. And I think, and then a lot of the time the misconception is, like, I just want to touch back on the intake side of things. Having more protein isn't always then the answer, because I think I just wanted to make that clear, because we want to find enough protein, but just because, say, I think the general consensus is normally between like 0.8 to 1 gram per pound, isn't it, roughly around that, or like 1.8 to 2 per kilo?
Yeah, I mean, we've got if people do want to know, we've got I posted some stuff on protein quite a lot on our Instagram, so if they just scroll back through, and I posted an article on macros again recently, but it's the RDA is very, very low, guys. Regardless if you're trying to lose fat or gain muscle, like 0.8 grams per kilo, they're saying, is the RDA. Now that's very, very low. I think maybe some listeners have eaten that in a meal, and I think I have a couple of times. But you're looking at, like, protein is just as important in a fat loss phase as it is in a strength phase, a muscle gain phase. So yeah, you want to be looking around kind of like minimum 1.4 for general health, 1.2 to 1.4 for general health. Then you're looking at the volume and intensity of your sessions, maybe going up to kind of 1.6. As a bit of a kind of really good ballpark figure to start with for people. And now if you're, depending on what you're wanting to do, you can go up to kind of 2 grams per kilo per body weight. And, that's a nice thing. And look, there's some research to say kind of 2.2 to 2.4 is a good thing, but you really need to distribute it across the day. So it's that's the most efficient thing in terms of building muscle. So regardless of what your overall targets are, we're not in if it fits your macros and you can just shovel in 160 grams of protein, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. I see a lot more in the research, but I see it anecdotally that people, when they distribute their protein from a muscle point of view, it's much more beneficial, but also from a satiety and a general kind of like managing their intake point of view, it's much better, much more efficient. So
just on this, I think, because obviously getting your protein in throughout the day, and obviously there are many ways of getting in, like through either like supplements like protein powders, whey, vegan, all that lot. Also with meats. Now, quite a lot of the time I see a very common intake of, say, chicken breast as their sole way of getting protein in, and something that I try and talk to a lot of my, say, clients and so forth is about getting a wide variety of proteins with the fats. Because something I actually heard online once, which was which really kind of stuck with me, is I don't see any animals in the wild with no fat on them. Do you know what I mean? Like that, so that you're trying to eat. So normally protein comes with fat of some sort. So that some of the health benefits to that, is that something that you should be thinking about, or is that another type of bro science?
No, I don't necessarily think you need protein with fat. I think that, most meats or animal meats or fish and stuff will have some form, a little bit of fat in them, because it will have intramuscular fat. So, there obviously are fattier meats, but again, it goes back to what your goal is. So if you're trying to stay leaner and get a little bit stronger, then probably choosing slightly leaner cuts of meat and fish, and eggs and vegan sources of protein, then that would be a better thing to do, because it's a caloric balance that you're looking for. So if you're having chicken thigh as opposed to chicken breast, it's still just probably the same volume, but it's just going to be slightly more calorie dense. So if you're trying to get leaner, trying to stay leaner and put a bit stronger on, then get a bit stronger, then I would say do that. But if you're trying to be a bit more aggressive, again, going back to that hard gainer, again, I just think people set themselves up. You're a hard gainer because you eat lean chicken breast and lean turkey breast and white fish. And I'm like, what are you doing? Eat chicken thighs, eat steak, eat eggs, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, well, that's why you're not getting any stronger or bigger, because you're basically eating like a 16-year-old girl. Like, it's like, come on, you got to eat.
I think you touched that with the hard gainer. Sorry, just because it's that I wanted to. Can we just discuss then the hard gainer and what the other body types are with this? Because I think this flows quite nicely onto that. So if you obviously got your hard gainers, so that's someone. I'll let you go through the body types.
Yeah, you got ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph. So ectomorph is like the tall, skinnier, or just skinny person. Mesomorph is a bit more muscular, a bit more athletic, and then endomorph is someone that's a little bit more rotund, a little bit higher body fat. Now, mate, guys, I don't know what you've had in your experience, but I've had people come to me and be like, "Oh, what should I eat for my body type?" And I'm like, it doesn't matter what your body type is now. You should be eating for the body type that you want to be. So that's the key. So if you're a endomorph and you want to be a mesomorph, you've got to eat to get towards an endomorph. You don't eat because you're an endomorph. And it's so, you need to be so individual with this. But like I say, there's things that are more predisposed when you are that body type. So an ectomorph, because I want to talk about this, when you're not helping yourself when you're trying to get stronger. Number one thing, so say this endomorph comes to us, right, let's get the good progressive overload training program in, boom. But then they're eating, like you say, they're eating maybe 3 times a day and they're snacking once. So straight away, I would increase meal frequency. That's one thing that I see a lot of people don't do. They'll eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they might have a little bit of fruit as a snack. So straight away, a simple thing would to be like, okay, keep your meals exactly the same. And then we're just going to increase a snack and a shake post-workout. Straight away, we've probably increased by 350 calories, and it hasn't really impacted their structure too much. Because endomorphs might have slightly smaller stomachs. They might struggle with volume of food. So again, they're predisposed to it. So yes, but it's not an excuse. You can still kind of manipulate around it. So you can eat a little bit more meal frequency, then we increase meal size. Okay, so all too often I see people come to us and go, I want to get bigger, I want to get stronger, right, I just got to eat more. And then they eat a ton of chicken and broccoli, in their evening meal. Now, lean chicken and a massive hit of fiber from broccoli. So it makes them really full for not a lot of calories. And because the bro science of chicken and broccoli and rice, that's what they've been, accustomed to. So this is where, I can understand why people get a little bit, misled. So straight away, you've got to be going more calorie dense cuts of meat and fish and eggs and vegan sources. So you've got to be right, swap chicken breast for chicken thighs, swap turkey for turkey, 10% turkey mince, for a lean steak, swap a ribeye, eat your bloody egg yolks. Stop giving me egg white omelets and all that rubbish. Things like this can be a simple way to not really change the meal, but you're going to increase the caloric density of your meal. Now, you can also then, blend your food. You can increase liquid nutrition. So, you've got to flip it on its head, and there's ways of increasing your intake relatively simply. One of the ones I use for a lot of mine is cook rice in coconut milk. Just simple. It's the same thing. You're eating rice, but instead of eating, whatever, it's instead of eating, it's 100 and 20 calories per serving. It's 200 calories per serving because you got the fats from coconut milk in there.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, mate, it's amazing. I'm doing a thing on pimping your rice at the moment, like blending, like, mate, it's amazing. Like, people need to upgrade their rice game.
Yeah.
This is my new thing, right? So you can blend like coriander, garlic, and whatever, lime, and something like this, like with a little bit of stock in a blender, and then cook your rice in this. Oh, mate, it's like, don't go, no more plain rice. This is my new hashtag. We'll get this going, lads.
I love it.
But like, the other one that I use for clients as well is, if I said to you two guys, right, I want you to eat a 250 gram steak. Okay, obviously you have to go, cut it and chew it, and depending on the quality, it can be quite a laborious process. Now, if I said to you, I've got an extra large shredded beef burrito, I bet you eat that in about 30 seconds.
Yeah. So
one tip, if you want to eat a little bit more, is to slow cook your meats and make it more like baby food. So slow cook and shred your chicken thighs, because we're trying to increase calories.
Yeah.
Do your beef and slow cook your beef, or cook it down so it's shredded, so it's easier to consume. If you do that as opposed to a whole bit of meat, it's so much easier to consume. Like, if you put things in wraps, I've got an athlete at the moment, and he was looking to increase his intake, and I was like, just stick everything in a wrap. He was eating like rice and something chicken for lunch, and I was like, okay, make a burrito. There's an extra 35 grams of carbs straight away, and it's nicer because everything tastes better in a wrap. So it was, when you're looking at like hard gainers, that's why I don't think that is so much of an issue. I think people are just not doing stuff that's going to help them. So and also maybe reduce the fibrous food. Like, fiber fills us up. So I'm not saying don't eat your veggies, but I'm saying maybe cauliflower and broccoli needs to be saved for certain days of the week, or maybe in your deload week when we're trying to lean out a little bit. And using like spinach and tomatoes and root veg and stuff like this, which is a little bit more calorie dense, but it's a little bit lower fiber, and it's not going to fill you up as much, which will allow you then to eat a little bit more carbs, a little bit more fats. And then don't be scared of adding a little bit more oils to your dressings, and that doesn't mean any more volume, but the calories can go up by 200 calories in a meal. So all like those tips, guys, are really, really easy for people that are, like I say, struggling to eat a little bit more consistently, because it is challenging. So if you can do these, you should start to kind of see the scale move, the more weight on the bar, and you should start to kind of feel a little bit more towards coming from an endomorph towards a mesomorph. And that's what you want to feel. You want to be feeling more athletic, more muscular, more powerful. And if you can do that by consistently eating a little bit more spread across the day, then you're going to be winning. Now, if you're an endomorph, you basically just got to flip that on its head. You still got to eat in your protein, but you want to be choosing lean sources. You still got to be eating your veggies, but you want to be including more fibrous stuff to make sure that you're full, and make sure you're not over consuming calories, which is then going to prevent your progress from getting towards a more athletic physique.
Awesome.
Can on this, because I think it'd be a nice segue, is can we touch on a bit testosterone? And obviously, like as we've mentioned, like when you become a little bit more, say, primed up, we mentioned it, like being a bit more insulin sensitive and being leaner, your testosterone can be a bit higher, which is obviously going to then help with muscle gain. So two points I wanted to ask. One, what would be maybe a blanket strategy you'd suggest for maybe foods or things to help increase testosterone? And secondly, if someone's testosterone is absolutely in the tank, what would be a suggestion maybe for the first couple of weeks to kind of maybe restart that thing to really start helping them build some muscle?
Okay, very good question, Rob. So testosterone is a very kind of like, I don't know if this is the right word, transient thing. It can change quite quickly, but it's not set in terms of like, right, the leaner you are, the higher your testosterone. Like, if you get really, really lean and like your tanks, like it's like Goldilocks porridge. You need the right amount, like it's just the right. And if you put too much body fat on, then you've got higher basically, higher aromatase enzyme, higher estrogen, which then suppresses testosterone. So you need the right balance to get testosterone in the right level. Inflammation can lower testosterone. So that's from a higher body fat point of view. You're more inflamed. Poor diet. So if your diet, even though your calories and whatever are on point, if your diet's crap, then it's going to be higher inflammation, which can suppress testosterone. And then too much training can suppress testosterone. Okay, so there's a thing, I won't bore people too much, but there's a thing called pregnenolone steal. So basically when you're constantly releasing cortisol, okay, cortisol steals pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is like a precursor to the androgen hormones, testosterone, and goes into estrogen. But what happens is the pathway is stolen by cortisol because your body's having to pump out cortisol or produce cortisol all the time. It doesn't allow the pregnenolone to go in and produce testosterone. So it's called pregnenolone steal. So if you're doing junk volume, if you're just training too much, if you're just trying to do too many extras because you're scared of putting on body fat, or your lifestyle is so stressful that you're constantly wired, then testosterone can be suppressed due to higher levels of cortisol. So this is why following a specific program is really, really crucial. And you need to have that stress recovery adapt curve. Like you need to stress the body, but you also need to recover so you can adapt. If you just keep banging the drum, then testosterone can be suppressed and then your progress is going to be suppressed. So foods, like, again, people would go straight onto Google and be like, testosterone boosting foods and supplements. Now there are some key nutrients, for testosterone, but one of the biggest things is eating enough and sleeping enough. They're the two biggest things for testosterone production, or having healthy levels of testosterone, as well as the kind of things of, having the right amount, not too low body fat, not too high. Now there are some foods that contain certain nutrients, such as zinc. Zinc is very crucial for testosterone. So is selenium. So is magnesium. So are omegas, because they help to lower inflammation, as well as numerous other health benefits. Protein intake across the day is crucial. So these kind of things there's not so much specific nutrients that boost testosterone. I think there's a couple of supplements now. If people want to go onto examine.com, there's a few ones, I can't even pronounce it, Tonga Ali, and a few others that have showing some early signs of actually being beneficial. But again, it's just no point in even thinking about that if you're sleeping 4 hours a night and your lifestyle's stressful and you're not consuming enough zinc and good quality foods and stuff like that. So that would be my advice for testosterone, just to be looking at more lifestyle and environmental changes, and before you start to even think about supplementation.
Yeah.
Hope that kind of explained that well.
That's perfect, because I know obviously when you start looking online, and this is where it can be quite hard sometimes to weave through the information, because there's so much of it out there. And so I just wanted to touch on fasting. Now, obviously, fasting a lot of the time is utilized as a maybe a way of eating to assist with fat loss. But from the talks of increased IGF-1 and that growth hormone, that kind of goes against then your splitting protein throughout the day. So would fasting be a good strategy for someone that might be a little bit higher body fat and still trying to put on muscle? Would you say that would be good? Obviously, if someone's a hard gainer like that type of person, fasting would probably be the worst thing they could do. But for someone, let's say, someone like myself, say as an example, who is a bit more towards the endo/meso type person, maybe fasting might have some benefits towards my test. Is that true, right? Or not?
Yeah, that could be correct. Again, it's got to be done in the correct way. So yeah, there are some favorable hormonal changes from growth hormone and etc. from like doing fasting, but this is basically like flicking the light switch on, and then there's no light bulb in a way. So you can flick the light switch on, but then if you're fasting and then eating like a little sparrow for the rest of the day, you ain't gonna put on any muscle. It doesn't matter how high your IGF-1 or your growth hormone is. It doesn't matter. You could have 1,000% increase, but it doesn't matter. So this is what I see again: people not doing stuff to help themselves.
No.
If you want to fast, then you got to eat enough in your feeding window.
Yeah,
That's it.
You got to distribute it in that feeding window. Then it's a very useful strategy, like you say, for those people that are on that thing. Whereas if you're an endomorph, I'm like, why are you spending 16 hours a day not eating? You ain't put on muscle in 4 years. So what are you doing? So then I would be like, no, you need to eat breakfast. No, you need to eat a breakfast and a snack mid-morning, because you're not putting on any muscle. And actually, you know, there's lots of other things that can boost growth hormone. You just need to bloody sleep more. So if you do that rather than worry about fasting, then your growth hormone's going to go up anyway. So
sleep it really is. I think it's everyone's realizing now the untapped thing of the simplicity of giving yourself enough time to sleep, to essentially forget about all the supplements and all this other stuff. Sleep is such a good thing for the body in all states, whether it's fat loss, muscle gain, just well-being, everything. It's like the key thing that you can be doing alongside obviously eating well and training hard and so forth.
Yeah, but it's good. I mean, you boys both got Whoops.
Yeah.
Do you use?
I've moved up to the Aura Ring.
Ah, yeah,
That's
nice.
really good.
Nice.
Really like it. I was just got a bit fed up with paying monthly for it. So but I moved over to the Aura Ring, and I've really, because my problem is I compare a lot of the time. So I see people's HRVs, I see people's stats. I'm just like, why is my HRV not that good? So it can be a little bit. It's just hard sometimes not to see. But then because not many people have the Aura Ring that I say no, I'm now looking at my stats subjectively rather than objectively. So I'm now looking at how I'm improving over the weeks and stuff. For using both, I do love the user face of a Whoop, and I love how they've done it. I think it's a great bit kit.
Yeah, I think the real only useful thing on the Whoops is sleep. When it tells you like you need to have this much sleep, go to bed at this time.
Yeah.
So you need to. I think it's brilliant, Mike. I think that's what my clients and my feedback. That's a big thing. But yeah, there's so much research, guys, on fat loss. Like they did one. I think I read one the other day on. They had people sleep for 8 hours or 7 hours, and then they had people sleep for 5 hours or 4 hours, and everything else was the same. And then the people that slept 3 hours more a night, or 2 hours more a night, even, they basically just crushed it. Everything else was the same. They lost more body fat. Health markers improved by simply doing that, and it was over like a 6-week period. So it's not even that long. And it's just if you're not doing the basics, then we can talk to the cows come home about supplements. But it's just letting the people that listen to this just don't take things at face value. It's just trying to understand the mechanisms behind it, and that's I think why I love the podcast so much, because it is just making sure that you're aware. Like you say, fasting is a great tool in the toolbox, but you've got to be using. You don't use every single tool and every single job, and you got to pick the right one. And hopefully, these podcasts help people to pick the right tool at the right time.
Just on the sleep, actually, I think there's a stat about insulin sensitivity. Like if you lose a few hours sleep in one night, your insulin sensitivity goes through the floor. So everything we were saying before about trying to optimize your insulin sensitivity, you can be doing all those things right, but if you get a shit night's sleep, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. Yeah, and
like I say, hunger hormones get thrown out of whack. People's satiety levels go down, so they just want to eat more, and they can't satisfy the hunger. So it's challenging. And Rob, you've got a little one, and I'm 3 weeks away from having one. So my sleep's going to be affected. So you have to be, like say, then just maybe reassessing goals and making sure that you can put in strategies to address that. And like it goes back to the food choices again, guys. Like if you can't, if insulin sensitivity is lower, what can you do? Well, I can do a little bit of strength training to increase it. I can then maybe increase my fiber intake and my protein intake to increase the satiety of my meals, to increase, decrease the my cravings throughout that day. Maybe that's when I would go to a more little and often set up in terms of my diet, because then there's less time between my meals, which means there's less chance of me overeating in that meal, because I'm not starving myself maybe 4 or 5 hours in between meals. Also, to try and regulate my intake, I might implement some fasting just to kind of regulate my eating patterns on certain days when maybe I've had this, I've been up since 3 a.m. or whatever. I might fast to a certain time just to kind of get back onto a normal rhythm. So again, tools in the toolbox.
That's it. One question I had for you, Liam, was around the cycling of your surplus and dropping your calories down on a deload week. What do you think about the concept of a body weight set point? So people have so for the listeners, there's a concept in primarily bodybuilding where your body likes to tend towards a certain weight. So if you do a bulk or a cut, you want to stay at that weight for a period of time, so a maintenance phase, before you try and do the opposite. So traditionally you do a long bulk, put on as much muscle as you can, fat will come along with it, but you should stay at that weight for a little period of time before you go straight into a cut. Otherwise you risk losing some of the muscle or more of the muscle that you've just put on because your body's just trying to get back to how it was. What are your thoughts, please, Liam?
It's I think it's something that you do need to do. I do think you need to have this period of time where you're in homeostasis. So maybe not like a set point. So, you have this time where your body is basically in maintenance homeostasis rather than in a constant flux of like, a deficit or a surplus. Now, the body's set point is basically on your metabolism, like, your, but it's changeable. Okay. And what you want to try and do is, it's almost like going back to what we first talked about at the start about bodybuilders and having their year-round physique. It's the Floyd Mayweather versus Ricky Hatton setup. So Floyd Mayweather would be would be hovering around his fight weight for most of the time. Now his body weight set point is relatively set, whereas if you said to Ricky Hatton's, his body doesn't really know what his homeopathic set point is because he's just fat, then fit, ripped, and then fat, then thin, then ripped. And what you want to try and do is the body likes structure. We like to be in homeostasis. So having this time where your body does get into it, or basically just allows your body to get into a new set point, a new maintenance, is a really, really great thing because your metabolism is a changeable thing. So if you're constantly dieting and constantly in a surplus, then it's going to be challenging to know what your weight is, what your maintenance calories are. So I think it's a really useful strategy to get to a set point and stick at that for a couple of weeks. Now, to do that, to get to a body weight set point is, does take a little bit of like awareness and tracking to understand that. And it's just to let you know that, yes, obviously there is, everybody's set point will be different and it will be just based on a lot of like, your current body fat, muscle mass. But trying to get to a set point where before the next block, the next phase, you feel comfortable, like, okay, I feel good at this weight. I'm kind of maintaining my weight. Obviously it will fluctuate a little bit, but the average across a week is relatively consistent for maybe 2 weeks. It then allows you, how we would use a set point is it allows you then to make a decision on where you go from a caloric point of view. Because if I said to you, Ash, if you don't know what so say you're like, right, my set point, my body weight is like, right, I've been at 75 kilos now for 2 weeks and I'm eating 2,500 calories. We'd be like, cool, like your set point's there and your maintenance is there. So now if we want to drop or lose body fat, we can go lower, or we want to increase, we can go higher. Whereas if you don't understand A, your current intake, or B, your set point, and I said to you, I want you to eat a little bit less, and you'll be like, well,
less than what?
Eat a little bit less than what? Yesterday I ate 3,500 calories. Today I ate 1,800. So it's that awareness of then knowing what the next phase is, and I think that's where the set point and maintenance is a really useful strategy for people to know. And constantly trying to look for deficits, gains, and being in this constant state of flux, I think is just it's a tiring thing. So just trying to get into that and have that awareness is a really powerful thing.
I think it's a massive argument in favor for your lean gains approach, where it's just a consistent message to the body. It knows what you're trying to do, and it just, it's not guessing. Whereas if you have these massive fluctuations in surplus deficit, your body's never getting that consistent stimulus to say, this is the direction of travel. We are slowly adding muscle, and you can trust that you're going to get the same food, only slightly different. And from an adaptation point of view, I think that consistency is what accumulates muscle over the long term.
110%.
Brilliant.
Beautiful. Have you got anything else you'd like to add on, Liam, that we might not have touched on today? Because I know we often see, I know Ash and myself, so when it comes to training, when people plateau, they normally end up stressing themselves and like doubting the program or doubting so many other things. So just thought it would be quite cool to maybe touch on just a bit of plateauing and the nutritional side of things, because obviously we can touch on that when it comes to the training side. But as a nutritional strategy, like what do you do whenever, say, clients stuff hit a plateau, or what do you tend to say?
The plateau is subjective, I think. So you need to be looking at where you're plateauing. Is it body weight? Is it training performance? And once you identify what that plateau is, then you can put in some interventions. So, like you say, literally like we were talking about there, if you're plateauing in terms of muscle gain, then, well, you're probably at maintenance. So you probably need to eat a little bit more. If you're plateauing in terms of training performance, and you just feel that you can't hit your weights or you can't hit your percentages, then I would increase your pre-workout nutrition. Like, that is a game changer for most people. All too often, people go into sessions underfueled and just worry about what to eat post-workout. And what are we trying to do when we get stronger and bigger is to create a stimulus for adaptation. Now, if you're just getting through your session, and then wait until you overeat post-workout, you're not going to, there's no point in overeating post-workout because you haven't really done anything. So if you eat more pre-workout, you've got more circulating fuel for the body to use. You're going to probably get a better pump as well. But you're going to maximize that training session, which is going to help you to progressively overload, which is help you going to break through that training plateau. So anybody that's feeling like they're struggling with their training, eat a little bit more pre-workout. Now, this can be in the pre-workout meal. So maybe 2-3 hours before, whatever they're eating, increase it. It could be adding a pre-workout snack, maybe something like a naked bar even, or any like some dates and some fruit or whatever. Eating something maybe 90 minutes, 60 minutes beforehand, or if you're getting closer, maybe using some liquid nutrition. So that's a really, really useful strategy. For anyone that trains in the morning, you might take a post-workout recovery shake of like protein and carbohydrates. Simply take half of it beforehand and then sip it through the session. Like, that's a real simple thing if you don't want to eat early in the morning. If you're looking at a plateau, you've got to identify what it is. And if you can put in a couple of bits of things to change that, then you're going to be crushing it. Plateaus is all about identifying where the plateau is and being awareness, and then putting an intervention in that's specific to that. And sometimes you're not in a plateau, you've just hit a block in terms of that area. So like, your squat hasn't necessarily gone up, but all of a sudden you've just stuck on an extra 5 reps to your pull-ups, strict pull-ups, or whatever. So you've got to be aware, and I think that. But then, honestly, number one thing, without going into too much detail, there's a bit on our hub as well about plateaus, but eat a bit more pre-workout. Yeah. Honestly, number one thing, you would be surprised at how much of a difference that makes. Like, huge, huge difference.
Awesome. I think
when it comes to people that train in the morning as well, I think, sorry, it's freezing. When it comes to morning nutrition, I think is really key, because we often see people that come to the gym for like the early morning classes or whatever in a strength phase and stuff. And as you say, they're massively underfueled, and it's such a key thing.
Yeah, just take like we use like Bolt Powder's Aftermath or any recovery shake with a little bit of carbs, a little bit of protein. We had a couple of guys doing weightlifting sessions at 6 a.m. and I was like, why are you eating a post-workout shake and then eating your breakfast 20 minutes later? I'm like, take your shake pre-workout, and game changer. Like, distributes his protein a little bit better, and he had energy in the session. But he's also providing protein to help with muscle gain. So yeah, anyone doing early morning training, that's a really simple tip.
Perfect. Just getting conscious of time, so to wrap up, I think it'd be really nice if everything we do, we try to make it quite principle based. So what would you say are the key principles when it comes to nutrition for putting on muscle? Let's keep it nice and broad.
So 5 steps. Hit your overall calories. Okay, that's the number one thing. Hit them overall and hit them consistently. That means more than 4 days a week. Then increase your meal frequency. So this can be from an extra snack. It can be adding on a post-workout shake, pre-workout shake, a pre-bed meal. Then increase your meal size. Okay, don't just jump to just eating a massive meal, feeling really full, and then not really wanting to eat anymore. Like, that would be the process of how to increase your intake. You need to have the right training stimulus, and then you've got to commit. And if you can follow that pathway, and then make some small changes, such as maybe increasing pre-workout nutrition to maximize the stimulus of your session, and then looking at all the other extras, such as sleep, such as making sure that you're recovering, and then manipulating your calories over a 6 to 8 week block, where you're making sure that you're in a slight surplus, and then maybe having 1 or 2 weeks where you're slightly lower, would be a really, really sensible way to approach things.
Beautiful.
Right, that's amazing. I think that's a real nice finish there. Be really cool if we could get you back on, mate, for maybe doing the same thing with fat loss and really give people a massive insight into some of the fat loss tips that you've kind of done there.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Yes.
Amazing.
Talk about fat loss. Love it.
We love it, yeah. So, guys, really hope you enjoyed today. I definitely did. Plenty of knowledge bombs there, as always, from the man Liam. Thank you for your time, for spending the time to listen to our podcast. We appreciate it, and thank you for all the support so far. As always, you can find us on all the usual platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and check out our website as well, lungeandlift.com. So apart from that, guys, just want to thank you again, Liam, for coming on and giving us your time, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, lads.
Cheers, guys.